You need to get that animal off the street before it hurts someone. That's how it started. My neighbor Cheryl, standing on the edge of my driveway with her arms folded and her lips curled like she just tasted something sour. My dog Max, a golden retriever with a heart of gold and a goofy wag that never quit, tilted his head in confusion. Max wasn't dangerous. He was the kind of dog who'd drop his favorite toy at your feet just to make you smile. But to Cheryl, Max was public enemy number one. She had moved into the neighborhood just 6 months earlier, but in that short time, she had made herself everyone's problem. Complaints about kids riding bikes too fast, yelling about trash bins left out for 10 extra minutes, even demanding the HOA force a neighbor to repaint their perfectly fine shutters. Cheryl lived for control, and Max was just her latest excuse to flex it. Her claim: that Max had lunged at her while she was walking past my yard. The truth? Max was on his leash behind a fence, chasing a butterfly with more interest than Cheryl. But facts didn't matter to her. By the next morning, she had filed a formal complaint with animal control. I thought it was just noise, another one of her antics. But when I got a letter in the mail stating there would be a hearing about my dangerous dog, my stomach dropped. Cheryl wasn't just making idle threats. She was trying to get Max declared vicious. If she succeeded, Max could be taken away from me, or worse. That night, I sat on the porch with Max's head resting on my lap. I could feel his calm, steady breathing, and I promised him one thing: I wasn't going to let Cheryl win. The next morning, I started gathering evidence: videos of Max playing with neighborhood kids, testimonies from friends who knew him for years, and even vet records showing he had passed every temperament test with flying colors. But Cheryl wasn't backing down. In fact, she doubled down, telling anyone who would listen that Max was a ticking time bomb. It was war now, my loyalty to Max against Cheryl's thirst for control. And I had no idea just how far she was willing to go to see us ruined. The week before the hearing, I noticed something strange. Every time Max and I stepped outside, Cheryl was there, lurking on her porch, clutching her phone like she was waiting for her big moment. She wasn't just complaining anymore, she was building a case. One evening, as Max sniffed around the front yard, I heard her voice cut through the air. "There it is. Proof he's aggressive." I spun around to see Cheryl holding her phone high, recording Max as he barked at a passing squirrel. She narrated dramatically, as though she were a reporter on the scene of a crime. "The dog is out of control," she said, zooming in on his wagging tail and harmless yaps. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, but I knew her tactics could work. If someone only saw her videos without context, it might look like Max was out of hand. She was fabricating a story, brick by brick, and the picture she was painting could cost me everything. That night, I called my friend Laura, who worked as a paralegal. After explaining the situation, she didn't hesitate. "Start documenting everything. Dates, times, witnesses. If Cheryl's recording you, you need to record her, too." So, that's exactly what I did. I set up cameras around the yard, not just to protect Max, but to protect myself. And within days, those cameras caught something incredible. At 6:13 a.m. one morning, Cheryl walked her tiny Yorkie past my house. She stopped, looked around, then deliberately let her dog run up to my fence. The Yorkie barked furiously at Max, who stayed sitting, tail wagging nervously. Cheryl, seeing my camera wasn't visible from her angle, suddenly jerked backward and screamed, "It's attacking us," even though Max hadn't moved. When I reviewed the footage, my jaw dropped. She wasn't just twisting the truth, she was staging attacks. But the real kicker came 2 days later. Cheryl marched over with a paper in hand and slapped it against my mailbox. "Consider yourself warned," she said smugly. It was a notice that she had filed a restraining order against Max. Yes, against my dog. That was the moment I realized Cheryl wasn't just difficult, she was dangerous. If I didn't fight back with every ounce of proof I had, she might actually succeed in taking Max away from me. The hearing was approaching fast, and I knew it would all come down to who the judge believed. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where lives could change in a single afternoon. I walked in with Max's leash in one hand, though he wasn't allowed inside. His absence felt heavy, and a folder thick with evidence in the other. My chest tightened as I spotted Cheryl already seated, perfectly composed with a smug smile that told me she thought victory was inevitable. The judge entered, and the room quieted. Cheryl wasted no time. She launched into her story, her voice trembling just enough to sound believable. "Your Honor," she said dramatically, "this dog lunged at me. It snapped its jaws inches from my leg. I've lived in fear every day since." She clutched at tissue for effect, dabbing at imaginary tears. Then came her videos. She played clips of Max barking at squirrels, pulling slightly on his leash, even jumping excitedly when I came home from work. Out of context, it did look chaotic. Cheryl painted herself as a victim trapped in a neighborhood with a beast. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and slid my evidence across to the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor," I said, "this is not the story of a dangerous dog. This is the story of a neighbor determined to twist the truth." The judge leaned forward as I played the footage from my security camera. There was Cheryl's Yorkie charging my fence. There was Max sitting calmly, not even barking back. Then came Cheryl's staged scream, so clearly fake that even the clerk stifled a laugh. I followed up with testimony letters from neighbors who had known Max for years. One described how Max played fetch with their toddlers. Another wrote about how he once sat patiently with an elderly man until help arrived after a fall. These weren't the stories of a menace, they were the stories of a gentle soul. Finally, I brought out Max's veterinary records, temperament tests, training certificates, even a note from his obedience school praising him as exceptionally well-mannered. Cheryl's smirk faded with every piece of evidence. By the time I finished, she was shifting in her chair, eyes darting nervously. The judge looked at her sternly. "Miss Peterson, fabricating incidents is a serious matter. This court does not take kindly to false claims." His tone carried the weight of finality. My heart pounded. For the first time, I felt the tide turning. The judge's gavel tapped once, sharp and decisive. The air in the courtroom shifted, heavy with anticipation. I held my breath as he began to speak. "This court finds insufficient evidence to support the claim that Max is a dangerous animal. In fact, the evidence shows deliberate attempts to mislead this court." His eyes flicked to Cheryl, who stiffened in her seat. "Miss Peterson, your actions not only wasted judicial resources but caused unnecessary distress to your neighbor. You will be held accountable." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a rush of relief. Max was safe, but the judge wasn't finished. "As a consequence of filing false claims and attempting to deceive the court, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $7,500 to cover legal fees and damages." The gasp that escaped Cheryl's mouth echoed in the silent courtroom. She opened her mouth to argue, but the judge cut her off with a raised hand. "This matter is settled. Any further harassment toward your neighbor or his dog will result in additional penalties." I couldn't help the small smile tugging at my lips. Justice had been served, and Max's name was cleared. When I left the courthouse, Laura was waiting outside. She clapped me on the shoulder. "Told you the truth would win," she said, grinning. I exhaled, feeling the weight of weeks of stress finally slide off. At home, Max greeted me at the door with his usual goofy wag, oblivious to the storm that had nearly swept him away. I knelt down, wrapped my arms around his neck, and whispered, "We did it, buddy. You're safe." His tongue slopped across my cheek in reply, as if to say he'd never doubted me. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. For once, Cheryl wasn't the loudest voice on the street. People shook my hand, kids ran up to pet Max, and even the HOA president muttered something about keeping an eye on false reports. Cheryl, red-faced and defeated, kept her distance. In the end, it wasn't just about money or reputation. It was about standing up for the truth, even when someone tried to bury it beneath lies. Cheryl had underestimated me, and more importantly, she had underestimated Max. Because here's the thing, sometimes justice doesn't just protect the innocent, it bites back at the entitled and makes them pay dearly for their cruelty. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of this crazy story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next wild neighbor drama. Your support really helps this channel grow.